Keyboard binding is very personal and every player should edit and adjust their abilities to their own taste. With that said, and because of the many questions and requests in the past few months, the following video I will show you my personal bindings for both keyboard and mouse. I will also share all and every tips, tricks and reasons why certain skills should be located in certain spots and what is the logic behind each and every bound ability on all of my characters. Welcome ladies and gentlemen to my special video guide. This I should have done years ago probably. I'm glad so many of you seek advice very often and constantly keep active conversation on all fronts, Facebook, Twitter, during my live streams and here in the YouTube comments, under each and all of my videos. There is no better reward for me and all others like me when the viewer is grateful, respectful and interested in what I do. Let's begin with the real content of the video now. I expect your patience will be gone if I keep talking like this. Today we will talk about keybinds for both keyboard and mouse, user interface options and which modules of the UI should stay where, how big, why and so on. I'm going to explain about each of my personal keybinds, why it is there and its purpose. Let's start with the fact that I keep most of my keybinds very similar on all of my characters. Each of the different types of abilities sit in specific spots so I can easily find them and I don't have to wonder where my CC breaker is, where my class buff is, or where my main damaging ability is. Before going to the specific keybinds, I want to say a few words about some of these here. Most of all, Quickbars. As you will see, I have 4 of them displayed above each other in the bottom center of the screen. Above them we have the 2 HP modules where I have mine and my enemies. Alongside them I also have my target and so on and so on. I keep my buffs and debuffs big enough because my screen is quite big enough and I play with high resolution 1440p for those who may not know. So being able to monitor all the buffs, their durations and when they're about to expire is very important for pretty much all of the classes in the game if we want to play them to their maximum potential. The small bars on the left and right are just utilities and extra icons that I like to keep available in case I need them for something specific. Beginning with the binds. On the first row, which is number 1, it is called main quick bar. I have bound from 1 to 7 my most of my most damaging abilities and most of my most important abilities. I know it sounds weird, but I couldn't find better way to describe it. On the second row, I have a mix of shortcuts, mostly consisting of shift keys, some specific other buttons that are very close to WASD, the buttons I'm using for moving around, we'll get to that later, FNO through F5 and so on. The third row is full of Alt numbers, Alt 1 to Alt 4. After that we have some specific combinations for specific skills and stims, and on the right part of the toolbar there are some rarely used abilities, including my, as you can see, rocket boost. The last bar is probably the least important, and that's where I have placed skills that I don't use very often. For everybody, when you're starting to think about your keybinds, it's very important to imagine which of your skills are most important and where you want them. Most of us, including me, are moving with W for forward, A for strafing left, and D for strafing right. S is usually back moving, but it is not recommended in this game and pretty much in any game. Moving backwards is always bad. So it may be actually a good idea if you just unbound S as moving backwards. Backpedaling is something you will see people troll about all over the internet. By default, A is turning left and D is turning right. I'm not using those. Everybody should learn to strafe with A and D and turn the character and the camera with the mouse. We all know about the difference between left mouse turning and right mouse turning, but just in case someone did not know, left mouse turning, that means you're moving the mouse left and right and you keep pressing the left button, turns the camera around your character. Hold the right mouse button and move the mouse again. You're moving the camera and the character. Your character keeps facing forward and you're still behind him. That's not the purpose of the video, of course. We're going back to the keybinds. My most important abilities are located very close or as close as possible on buttons to WASD without combinations. This means my most damaging abilities are just one key press and not combination of shift and something or control and something. Shift and something, alt and something, control and something, and so on are usually things that you don't need every few seconds, which means those are not spammable abilities. Let me give you an example. When I want to move forward, I usually have the number 4 key as my main damaging attack on most of my tunes, because it's the easiest one to press, especially if you have a little bit of wider fingers. I don't think I do, but many people do. And if that's the case, number 3, which is for most people, surprisingly, the main damaging ability, is not really comfortable. That's why I'm putting my most important skill on number 4. Number 1 is usually my filler. Number 2 is a special type of attack that usually is a proc, or it is used in specific moments, not often. Number 3 is in most cases my builder ability. In this case for the Sentinel it's the slash. It's the most basic damaging ability that spends forced. It's considered the builder. Number 4 is my highest damaging ability, Merciless Slash. Number 5 and 6 are my dots. They are important, and number 5 and 6 are not exactly that very easy to reach, but of all available options, they are the easiest one to reach. Around the W key on the keyboard, on the left side, we have Q and E. It's very important to bind something on them. In my case, on Q I have Zilla Strike, and on E I have Force Sleep, because when I'm moving forward with W, it's extremely easy to quickly press one of those two, because they are very important skills and they're almost spammable. Not in any situation and not in any of the specs for the Sentinel or for any of the other classes, but in most cases these are the 2 keybinds that I value very much, and they're not damaging ability for me. I don't do DPS with these keys. Around the W on the right side we also have R and T. In my case for the Sentinel I have Dispatch on R because it's relatively easy to reach with the main finger of the left hand, but Dispatch is special ability that's not used all the time during a fight. On T, in this case, I have Blade Storm, and we all know that currently I'm spec'd for Watchman, and in this discipline, Blade Storm is pretty much never used, but for other characters and for other advanced classes for my Sentinel, T is sometimes useful. It's quite far, so I don't put any of my most damaging abilities or my most important abilities. On the upper row, you will notice probably and hopefully that in the 3rd slot I don't have control and 3. Usually my upper row is control binds in the left corner, but in this case it's the key marked with the wave. It sits the left side of number 1 on the keyboard. It is very easy to reach with your 3rd, or maybe if you prefer with your smallest finger, and that's where I put my overload saber. For any character there is a specific skill that should be used on cooldown, and it's not a damaging ability because that specific skill is not very easy to click while you're moving, and if you want to damage someone. But if you want to just click it without having to target something or without having to face something in a specific way, it is very useful. Valorous Call and Resolute are bound to my mouse. Now, of course, you can put them on any key that you prefer if you don't have mouse with side buttons. I will show in a little bit later the layout of my mouse and keyboard, because my keyboard has macros and my mouse has quite a few side buttons that are very easily reachable with my thumb. Parse code is an important skill, but by far not amongst the most important ones, and wherever you bind it, you will not be using it often, so it can be on a key somewhere a little bit distant from WASD. Resolute, however, is a very important one, especially if you're doing PvP, and it needs to be very quickly and easily be reachable. I would advise you probably something around Shift 4, Shift 5, or whatever you prefer. In my personal case, I always keep on all of my characters interrupting ability on Shift 5. It is not the most comfortable to press, but I don't need to interrupt that often, and especially now with the changes, every class interrupt ability has been moved with a much longer cooldown. Just like on the Sentinel, I keep some of the most important utility abilities here in this section of my toolbar. F1 through F5 I have Zen, Transcendence, Inspiration. On F4 I always keep my AoE stun. Sometimes it's requiring target to stun, sometimes I'm throwing a grenade like in the case of my Scoundrel, sometimes just like I'm clicking and something's happening around me. On F5 I always have the long stun. In Sentinel's case it's a disabled droid. On the upper row, just like so it happens, on Shift and C, because I don't know why, I don't remember anymore, it's relatively easy to make that combination, Shift and C, that's my healing stem. Shift and B, I've chosen to be my disappearing at. In most of my characters, Shift and B is my escape skill. On Alt 1, Alt 2 and Alt 3, usually, but not for all classes, I keep defensive abilities. Let me make a little bit of a distraction here and take away from the straight path I'm trying to follow. My skills may not seem in perfect order to anybody. They may not make sense when you look at them, but it's very important when you are binding keys to know which group is going where. I've done my best to separate them in groups whenever possible, so I know that all defensive abilities are next to each other, not because I only press them easier and quicker, but because sometimes I actually have to look at the cooldowns of the abilities. It's not always possible to remember absolutely everything, and not always everything is absolutely visible on your character without looking at the toolbar, and it's very important to know which one of the abilities are about to expire or about to become ready. Now in the case of the Sentinel, obviously Alt 1 is my Master Strike. It's quite easy to press, and usually Master Strike is used when I'm almost certain that it will not be interrupted and that I have about 3 seconds of free time. That's why it's bound to Alt and 1. It's not the most easiest combination to press because both of the keys are one on top and one below WASD. But with a little bit of training I got used to that. Another thing to mention, I've been using this similar combination of shortcuts and keybinds for maybe 8 years now, and I've played 3 different MMO games with these similar keybinds, which means my main abilities are always going in the same spots, my CCs and heals are going in the same spots, my defensive abilities are going in the same spots, and it's just a set of mind. That is something important if you are switching from a clicker to a keybinder. It will take you time. Obviously it will not happen like a miracle over a day or over a week maybe. Sometimes you could need 2 weeks, a month, I don't know. I don't want to enter argument, the old annoying argument, which one is better. I know many people who claim that clicker is absolutely fine and they can do whatever they wish with clicking. I personally do not agree. That's why I'm not clicking. I'm binding almost everything. You're looking at my screen and pretty much 90% of my abilities are bound to something. That's the way I prefer. That is something weird and unusual. For many years now I've been using my space to target my nearest enemy. I know that's strange, but that's how I'm used to playing it. There we go. Target nearest enemy. To jump, oddly enough, I'm using control and space. It is a little bit uncomfortable, but I've been playing like this for years and years, and I've gotten used to it. While in PvP, jumping is sometimes important, targeting is always the most important thing. And I found that it always works best if I target the closest enemy. Of course, I always have tab if I want to change to something. Targeting with the mouse is, well, let's call it forbidden. It's not a good idea, especially in Star Wars The Old Republic. Do not try to target with your mouse. You will regret, and very often you will suffer. Before I jump to the user interface and tell you why I have these modules situated in this manner, I want to show you some things about my mouse. This is my mouse. Its model is Corsair Vengeance M95, I believe, which is currently the latest model from Corsair, and I am using most of these buttons here because they're extremely easy to click. They're obviously all bound to some specific keyboard actions, so if I didn't have the mouse, I would be using some combinations. For example, number 11 is a combination of Control and 0. It's not easy to press by all means, but I'm not using Control and 0. It's just a means to translate this action to my mouse. And in my case, 10 and 11 are these keybinds here. Right now, they're both the same because they were created way back in time when we had clicky relics. We still have the clicky relics, but they're almost never used anymore. And the two buttons are close to each other, and in the heat of the moment sometimes I actually may press the wrong button, so that's why I prefer to have my two power stems next to each other. So whichever of the two buttons I press, I will have them. You've noticed, hopefully, that there are another set of power stems right here. Adrenos, excuse me, they are not stems. Sometimes when I'm doing something more casual, I just replace them like this. Move this one to this one and move this one to this one. They are still very easy to reach because I find it much easier to do swapping like this than swapping like this from the inventory. It's just a weird habit of mine. Back to the mouse. Another important thing when you are playing with voice and Mumble, TeamSpeak, or whatever other voice service you're using, it is very important that your keybind for push to talk, if you're using one, is a comfortable key. In my case, it's this one, number 15 on the mouse. In your case, it could be anything, but I definitely do not recommend you putting it on Control, Alt, or any other possibly and often very used key for anything. For example, if you put it on Shift, it may be comfortable to press it whenever you want, but whenever you don't want, you will press it, so you type something with capital letters and everybody on TeamSpeak or Mumble will have to listen to your typing. That's to some people annoying, to others not, each to their own. My keyboard has a side collection of buttons with macros, nothing too important. I'm using, in my case, G9, which is bound to 0, but because G9 is very close to WASD, where my left hand is most of the time, I have bound a macro. It's not a macro, but it's the ability to give me the class buffs, all the sets of class buffs. On G1 is the only macro that I've ever used in this game. The game, as we know, is not built for macros, and macros don't work well. If someone is telling you they're using macros, they either have no idea what a macro is, because they haven't played Star Wars Galaxies, but never mind. This is the stuck macro. When you're an endgame player or progression player, you're used to wiping, and saving time is very important. I don't want to go into the discussion where I hate when our stealth classes stealth and wait for everybody else to die, sometimes up to a minute. It may get a little bit annoying, but we are probably all used to that now, especially those of us who don't play stealth classes. Nobody likes to have huge repair bills from dying. A couple words on my user interface. Let's start with the idea of the healers. The most important thing I would like to advise you, which I obviously don't have at the moment, is where you put your operation frame setup. If you're playing with your right hand on the mouse, which is probably the bigger portion of the people watching my video currently, I would advise you to put the frame rate here. You have seen maybe and hopefully on all of my videos where I play healer, every healing setup with the standard situation is placing the raid group on the left side or the flashpoint group on the left side. I'm moving everything to the right. This is usually where my group is, but every time I'm a healer, I'm using the ops frame because it's much easier to click than the group frame. So the reason is I consider very obvious. It is a much shorter distance to travel with the mouse because my mouse is on my right hand and there is something happening inside my mind. I'm not a clicker, but that could actually be a useful tip for those of you who are clickers. It is a much shorter traveling time between the ops frame and the skills you need to click. I personally like to keep my mouse in the relatively middle right section of the game. I don't know why, it's just how I'm set. If you discover that you have such a comfortable or a comfort zone when you are playing, I would advise you to use it to its best potential. In my case, I consider very important to keep these HP bars and resource bars, or whatever they are called, the main modules with the character names and everything else, up in the bottom center, right above my toolbars, because I look at the toolbars quite often and it's very handy to have these things here. Even if you play on a smaller screen with smaller resolution, you have to admit it's stupid and uncomfortable to have them all the way up here in the upper left corner where it is the so-called standard and classic or retro. Look at this, so uncomfortable. You're looking at the skills here and then you have to go all the way up here to the up left corner and look at buffs, debuffs in your HP and your opponent's HP. My minimap in my case is in the upper left corner just because I'm used to having it there. It's absolutely not necessary to be there. I would not advise you to put it anywhere, but the minimap can be whatever you prefer. The only place I would not advise you to place it is right in the middle here between your toolbars. Sometimes healers prefer to put the ops frames right here in the middle and the abilities on the left and right. I like my abilities being all together next to each other, so I know that this is the section with my toolbars and my abilities, active and passive. I have two modules for chat on the right side ever since my Star Wars Galaxies days, since 2005. I've been using the right bottom corner of the screen to display combat log results. The combat log in Star Wars Galaxies was much richer and in LOTR as well. Unfortunately, this one here in our game now only shows the killing blows, but it's still useful sometimes. And on the left side is everything else. That's why I have two covers when I'm streaming, one on the bottom left corner where my webcam is and another one on the bottom right corner. It's not just because my logo sits there. For those of you who are wondering, and I know there are quite a few because I've been asked during my streams many times, I'm using a scale down on my user interface. My screen is quite big, my resolution is quite big, there it is, 1440p, that's the name of my layout as well. But I'm also using a global scale down because I play my Sentinel as a main, and pretty much with every class I know, as I mentioned, where my abilities are sitting. I don't need to see a huge gigantic icon, and I'm using numbering, of course, like everybody should do. So it's very easy to see, you know where the skill is located. You just need a very quick brief look and you will see the cooldown time remaining or the animation, and you will know that this skill will be available now or in 2 seconds or in 5 seconds or whatever. I suppose this was pretty much everything I wanted to tell you. It might look a little bit chaotic, but I started with a script, and then the second part of the video in front of the game, actually, I decided to talk with whatever comes to my mind. I hope it was useful to you. If you have any other suggestions, questions, ideas, or anything, just write them down in the comments below, or maybe ask them directly during my live streams, whichever is more comfortable to you. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye. Thank you for watching this video. Remember, you can find me also on Twitch, Twitter and Facebook. For my non-Star Wars activities, I invite you to subscribe to my second YouTube channel.